Okay, so this is a great place to start with the Major Arcana. We're going to jump right in here with Major Arcana 1, and I'm going to try to get through as many Major Arcana today as I can. And I think we might be able to get through all of them. If not, we'll continue tomorrow morning. So we start with the Magus, and those of you who attended the convention last summer will recall that I gave an hour-and-a-half speech on this one card alone. And it's the first of the Major Arcana. I'm not going to spend that much time on this card this morning, but I am going to spend more time on this card than I am any of the others, because I believe it is the key to understanding the whole concept of Hermeticism. It's the key to understanding the tarot, and it's the reason why we're here. And when I say that, I don't mean just here sitting in the classroom. I mean here on Earth. So I think it's a very powerful card, and that's why I'm going to spend a little time. So let's begin with the word Magus. An odd word that wouldn't be used under everyday circumstances. It stems from an ancient Chaldean word, meaning the power of the mind. Other words deriving from this Chaldean word, and I'm going to write them down over here, are Magi, and so I don't forget, magician, magic, and imagination. Magi, 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 magi. Interesting. So, magi is another word that is not heard at all anymore, except as it relates to the Bible story of the Magi, the three kings of the Orient, or as we say, the wise men who followed the star of Bethlehem. So these kings or wise men who followed the star were actually astrologers, and no doubt graduates of a mystery school tradition. The Magus stands dressed as a priest with his right hand pointing toward the heavens and his left hand pointing towards earth. The symbol of the first law of Hermetic occultism, as above, so below. This law explains that we as conscious human beings are affected by the astral and spiritual planes, and in the reverse, how we can, by directing our thoughts and emotions, affect the astral and spiritual planes, and thereby manifest changes in our own lives. His scepter in hand, reaching toward the heavens, not only receives information from the inner planes, as represented by the star, like an antenna, receiving information like an antenna, it also sends out information to the inner planes, like a transmission tower. This stance also makes reference to the mother of occult sciences, astrology, which is reflected in the symbolism of tarot. We make this sign when we become initiated in the Brotherhood of Light, and when we begin and end any gatherings of its members, except classes. We don't do it when we do classes. Yes, Janet?
I have another input on that, because I believe and know to be true that when you give a really clear vision to God, you can manifest it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so sometimes it's not so much coming in as it is going out.
Exactly. And that's why I said his scepter is an antenna receiving, but it's also a transmitter,
yes,
sending out. And that's the nature of our being as living in two realities, the physical and the astral, or the spiritual. We have the ability to communicate between the different realities, the different planes. And that's what's so magic about us, because we can manifest in our lives. And that's what the Magus tells us that we can do. As we're making this sign, we hear, as we're making the symbol of the religion of the stars, we hear that it symbolizes and recognizes that man's highest mission is to reflect divine will and aspire to science, wisdom, and power, and the determination to dominate all acts of life by the spirit of all that's good. So when we are manifesting in the spirit of all that's good. You will note that the Magus is standing in front of an altar, a place where offerings are made to the divine, and a place that, like himself, bridges the spiritual and physical worlds. On his altar are the 4 signs or suits of the tarot: a cup representing the element of water, a sword representing the element of earth, and a coin representing the element of air, and the scepter that he holds in his right hand representing the element of fire. These 4 elements, fire, earth, air, and water, must be present in some combination to perform magic. Remember that magic is a word deriving from the same Chaldean word for power of the mind, to perform the magic of manifesting. The Magus clearly shows his dominion over the 4 elements. The ibis depicted on the altar of the Magus is an indigenous bird to Egypt. He has 2 sets of eyelids. Both sets of lids are opened while the bird is awake. But when asleep, a second, almost transparent lid covers his eyes in order that he can still see. In other words, he represents constant vigilance and has the ability to always be aware of his surroundings. You know, there's a unique mixture of intellect and intuition that goes on within our brains. And when we have something that we want to find out, or that we're thinking about, pondering, we can find answers by just looking around and just paying attention to snippets of conversation or what we might see on a billboard or hear on the radio, or any number of places that will give us insight. This bird could also represent a gray heron, which is interchangeable with the mythological phoenix in Egyptian art. The phoenix was the temple bird of astrology priests in ancient Heliopolis, and symbolized rebirth, regeneration, and new cycles. All of these can be key words for the Magus. The Magus is Arcanum 1 of the Major Arcana. He is the beginning. His number 1 represents wholeness, oneness, or unity with all that is. He is the archetypal man made in the image of the Creator, if you will, manifesting what he gleans from the inner planes into the outer planes of the physical realm. Usually he is depicted wearing a tail-biting snake wrapped around his waist, which is also a symbol of primordial wholeness. Snakes have also been the symbol for the tempter in the fall of man.
Can you turn on your mic? Oh my gosh. You can hear, but it'll sound better when you turn it on.
Well, I'm sure it will. Thank you for reminding me. Oh, well.
No, we can still hear.
Into a little presentation, a little rain must fall, right? Okay. Okay. Where was I? Snakes. Yes. Snakes have also been the symbol for the tempter in the fall of man and the power that impregnates the virgin whom we will meet next, which I like that sort of introduction into the feminine. Sometimes a lamescate, or the symbol of eternity, appears over his head or elsewhere on the card. The Magus
is a conduit to what was in the beginning, what is now, and what shall always be. In some versions of the Old Testament, the first line reads, "In the beginning there was the Word." The word, however, very loose translation of the Greek logos, which has many meanings. It can mean order, ratio, discourse, reason, mediation, and first cause. These are all words that could be used to interpret the Magus in a spread too. In Hermeticism, the logos, or mediator between the divine and the physical plane, was the revealer of wisdom and knowledge, Hermes Trismegistus. In Christian symbolism, Jesus is represented as the revealer and mediator between heaven and earth. Logos is the manifested image of an otherwise unknowable source, but it is also the way back to the source, or to the one. Like Mother Nature is a manifested image of its divine source, and it is the way back to knowing that divine source. The Magus is the Renaissance man, the universal man of all knowledge, created in God's image, co-creating with God, rising to a position of power through his own abilities and effort. His key words are will and dexterity, or mental dexterity, and he attempts through his will and dexterity to develop every potential that his human nature offers. A Magus yearns to experience the divine and will not settle for just knowing about the divine in theory or relying on faith alone. So we can come to the conclusion that this is a card representing the power of the mind, because it is only through first thinking about something that something can ultimately materialize. Everything in this room, everything that you see around us, everything that you're wearing, somebody thought about first. It's where it starts. It all happens in the mind. And then somebody creates this bowl, or this vase, or this granite, or this sculpture, or this outfit. Greg Braden in The Divine Matrix wrote, "Manifestation begins with the willingness to make room in our beliefs for something that supposedly doesn't exist. We create that something through the force of consciousness and awareness. Experimental evidence in the world of quantum physics today is teaching us that we are forming the cosmos, as well as beings experiencing what we're forming. That is because consciousness appears to be the substance from which the universe is made, and we, as conscious beings, are able to manipulate that substance, just like we manipulate electricity." That is Hermeticism. This card can also be interpreted as communication, because Hermetic teachings describe the divine as existence, life, and mind, and describe mind as voice, speech, and word, because how else do we communicate our thoughts? You notice in the upper right-hand corner of the Magus the glyph for the planet Mercury. The Magus, according to Egyptian tarot, is ruled by Mercury, which is the planet of thought, communication, and short journeys. Every deck differs as to its astrological correspondences, but in most decks, the Magus, or the Magician, as it is more commonly called, is usually ruled by Mercury, if it is given an astrological correspondence at all. So to summarize, the Magus in a spread can be interpreted as, are you ready for this? Will. You don't have to write these down, Michelle, they're in your notes. But you can read along if you want. Will, mental and physical. Dexterity, power of the mind, thinking before acting, planning, wholeness, oneness, unity, beginnings, mediation, vigilance, order, ratio, discourse, reason, first cause, experiential knowledge, consciousness, communication, thought, short journeys, and presence of mind to stay in the moment. Thank God I wrote all those things down for you. Otherwise, you'd have writer's cramp by now. Okay, the point I really want you to remember about the Magus is this. He is united as one with the Creator, the Absolute, the Matrix, God, all that is, or whatever you want to call it. He is at one with the Creator. He is whole and divine, and that's our true nature and what we are striving to rediscover and reconnect with. Remember also that the first basic tenet in Hermeticism is the universe is mental and held in the mind of the all. And that's really what the Magus represents. Here are a couple of great quotes I'll leave you with. All Father Mind, being life and light, did bring for the archetypal man co-equal to himself. And man, from life and light, changed into soul and mind. Life to soul, from light to mind. And that's directly from Corpus Hermeticum. I think it's beautiful. A second quote is easier to understand. It says, imagination, which we have up there on the board, imagination creates reality, and man is all imagination. And that was a quote from Neville. He was a visionary and mystic. Before we leave the Magus, note that he is standing up. This position of standing in the Egyptian tarot indicates a masculine, assertive, modifying, and sometimes aggressive energy. In the next card, we will examine a feminine, receptive, adaptive, and sometimes passive energy. These terms are not meant to be sexist, but are given, as would the yin and yang, to convey what is essentially the basic natures operating in our dualistic reality. And let's go over the cards that I've chosen. Here in the upper right-hand corner, this is the Magus from the Knapp Hall deck, which is again Hermetic. And I want you to see this interesting little hat he's got on.
Yeah, that's great.
And that is the Lamisket, or it is the sign of infinity.
Right.
Down here, this one you all recognize. We have that same little hat up here, the Lamisket. He has the tail-biting snake wrapped around his waist. Our tail-biting snake is not so obvious, but it's right there. And this fellow comes from one of these Gothic decks. And I noticed that he has his, I think his sword is behind him. His wand is in front of him. His Lamisket is tattooed on his arm there. I don't know if you can see it. And then he's not really looking at coins or a cup. Maybe he is, but it's not clear. But one thing's for sure is he's thinking about something. He's planning. Yeah. So I'm going to grab my next group of cards here to talk about. Any questions or comments on the Magus before I go on to Veiled Ices?
Yes. What was the scepter? What element did that represent?
Fire.
Fire?
Mm-hmm.
Fire. Okay, and what was water? Which was
Cups. And we'll get into that later, Mercury. We'll be getting into all of that.
Hey, Allyn,
Yes.
there's a lot of buzzing on your mic. I don't know.
I have buzzing?
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
It says you might just turn it off. You might be just clear.
Really?
Yeah.
Am I speaking too loud in the mic? Is that what it
It's
is?
about 20% there's buzzing, but I know it gets annoying. So maybe just turn it off
Okay.
and we should.
Or down. Down might eliminate the buzzing.
I don't know if you can turn it
I don't
down.
think you can turn it down. It's either on or off.
Yeah.
Move it away from you more, maybe?
There's a switch. If I switch it all the way up, it's still on, and if I switch it in the middle, it's still on. So maybe if I just put it in the middle position, it might be better.
Okay, try it.
You want to try that?
It's in the middle position right now?
Yes. Am I getting buzzing?
Well, I don't know, but,
Well, just stop me if I am, and I'll turn it off. Well, I'd like to keep it on if I could, because
Is your mic on the different side this
no,
no,
it's
it's
right where
in
it
the same
was.
spot.
It's in the same spot.
Allyn,
Yes.
what do you make of the French le bateleur?
Oh, I'm sorry. What am I doing?
You're moving on.
I'm moving on. That's what I'm doing. Do you mean this up here? Which
No,
one?
the words,
at
the
bottom?
actual translation there.
Oh, I don't know what that means. It could mean. Does anybody know French?
No, but I have an interpreter on my phone.
Well, go for it.
I think
It probably
Yeah,
just
probably
means
does.
magician.
Yeah,
It probably just means
I think
magician.
Michelle's right.
The bearer
It's the
of the
wand.
wand.
Yeah. Oh, bearer of the wands.
Yeah.
Sure. The bearer of the scepter. And the bearer of the
or the
wands, as in a
the-
magician who would use his wand, right? In magic.
I think that word is baton. But
Oh,
yes,
baton.
it's baton. Right.
Okay. Well, that would make
But-
sense. That would make sense.
It
Okay.
sounds combative. That's why I asked.
Oh, wait.
Well, I've never known the magician to be interpreted as combative. I've known the magician to be interpreted as a trickster sometimes, who may outwit someone else, but not necessarily in terms of, actually fencing someone or using a sword,
You mentioned as part of the masculine association of the standing
The
position,
Mhm.
the
It
possibility.
means the fool.
Oh, really?
Oh, okay.
Well, see, in this deck, then, he equates the fool and the magician as the same guy. And you know what? The magician, it really does travel like the fool throughout the hero's journey. So that's a very interesting concept.
But that card, though, it does have a masculine connotation to, or a sub-influence, in that even having holding the
Scepter
scepter in the
aloft.
right hand.
Sure, it's
That's
masculine.
the executive hand, it's the
Right,
will, it's
right.
the,
Well, and I think when you were talking about the associations with the standing position, you said assertive, modifying, sometimes aggressive energy.
Yes, can be a progressive energy, of course, sure.
well,
That's
to
what we
create-
need for pioneering spirit.
Right,
That's what we need to, cut down the forest
Pioneering
trails.
spirit is a good associated
Yeah.
word with this too.
Right.
Pioneering mind.
Our pioneering mind, and all of that, certainly. How are we doing with the sound effects? That looks like I'm not coming through at all. From the way it's.
Yeah, I don't know. Just
Okay.
keep going.
Okay, I will.
They have to let us know. and
Okay,
I don't
great.
really hear anything.
You're not hearing anything. Excellent, that's always good news. Okay, let's go on to Veiled Isis. Veiled Isis, she is sometimes called the High Priestess or the Pappus. And in the weight deck, I think she's called the High Priestess. This seated position symbolizes the second of our basic energies, the receptive and sometimes passive feminine energy. She is the second card of the Major Arcana, and with her appearance, we have suddenly departed from the whole, or the one, and we have now the other, or the opposite. Here's where our reality of duality begins. Like the Magus, Veiled Isis is a unique combination of logic, reason, and psychic intuitive abilities. She is ruled by Virgo in the Egyptian deck, and the keywords for Virgo and Veiled Isis are science, analysis, and labor. I like to think of the Magus and Veiled Isis as the original soulmates in the story of involution. And in the Hermetic story of evolution, we begin as spirit, as a both masculine and feminine energy combined. And in our involution to earth, that spirit splits and it involves into matter as two separate entities, one masculine and one feminine.
And as we travel, as we evolve back to spirit, there comes a time when we actually meet our soulmate and we are reunited with that other half of ourselves. Now, during the break, Vidya pointed out that the upward triangle that we spoke about earlier, the symbol of the upward triangle, represents the masculine, and the symbol of the inverted triangle represents the feminine. So when we put them together, it becomes this unit of masculine, feminine that has to work together as one to carry us forward, to move us along. So when someone comes to you with the symbol, I meet my soulmate, it's probably not going to be at the local dance. According to our tradition, anyway. We have a very specific meaning for the word soulmate.
Can I just say?
Yes. Vidya.
This also means that you meet your soul internally.
Yes.
You can do that in dreams, and that's what Jung talks about, that it's the animus and the anima.
Yes, the animus and the anima. So
Right.
Vidya
So-
points out that it's meeting that part of your soul internally. And we do that in dreams when we envision the animus and the animos.
And when that happens, when like for a woman it's a
The male.
the soul shows up as a male.
Yes.
When that happens, then you have the inner marriage.
You have that marriage.
The sacred inner marriage.
This sacred inner marriage. Yes, and that's a beautiful thing and a powerful thing.
And in one way, how I see it is that the fool, that's the task of the fool.
Yes.
The tarot cards help us in that sense.
Yes.
To come to that point.
Exactly. And that's what we're trying to do as the Fool in the hero's journey.
Yeah.
We're trying to recapture our other half, our soulmate. We're trying to rediscover our unity.
So it's the coming together of duality.
It's the coming together or overcoming duality, which is also represented as hermaphrodites often in tarot. They use that. In alchemy, they use it as one body with two heads, one masculine and one feminine. You see it. It's called the conjunction.
Could that also be the discovery of your purpose, the thing that vitalizes you, the great work?
Well, certainly the great work, and I think after you've found your great work and you pursue your great work is when you're ready to meet your soulmate. Then you become whole. Yeah, that's how I envision it anyway. So the Magus masculine positive energy co-creates by focusing on the conscious mind, while veiled Isis, negative feminine energy co-creates by focusing on the unconscious or subconscious mind. It is a well-known fact today that the use of affirmations in every field, from sports training, salesmanship, to weight loss, actually trains the subconscious mind to manifest what it affirms. For example, if we tell ourselves that we are, in the present tense, healthy, wealthy, and wise, we eventually become so. And of course, the opposite is true. If we tell ourselves constantly that we are unhealthy, poor, and ignorant, that will manifest in our lives as well. Isis sits between the two pillars of the mystery school, or the pillars of Hermes. The red pillar on the left symbolizes the spiritual nature of mankind, and the black one on the right symbolizes the physical or earthbound nature of mankind. As humans, we function in both spiritual and physical realms at once. On her lap, there is an occult book that is partially covered, and she is veiled, or virgin. According to Michael Bajan, author of the Jesus Papers, quote, "There were always secrets in Judaism and the Christianity that developed out of it. Secrets that were never written down, but were carried on by an oral tradition," end quote. As we recall from the Ten Commandments, the Jews lived side by side with the Egyptians for 400 years, their language and cultures developing together. There are many aspects of Judaism and the Christianity that sprang from it that found its roots in Egyptian Hermeticism, which has its secrets too.
This image clearly depicts something that is secret, unknown, mysterious, unrealized, hidden, or something that can be known, realized, or found by utilizing both physical and psychic senses or drawing from our subconscious memory. When we learn, we have a chance to forget. But that information is not lost and gone forever. It's always recorded in our subconscious mind. We just have to find it. I think it gets harder and harder to find as we get older because we've stored up so much information in our heads. It's a lot to wade through.
And it keeps falling off the top. Go pick it up again.
Where the Magus is likely to communicate his intentions because doing what you say actually develops the will. Veiled Ices suggests that we keep silent as to our convictions, so as not to be influenced by the contradictions or misgivings of others. That is what is meant by the phrase from the Sermon on the Mount, "Do not cast pearls before swine." Veiled Isis is the archetypal Virgin Mother, as symbolized by the moon atop her head and her veil. Throughout history, God's messengers, or sons of gods, were recognized and defined by virgin births. By such virgin births, they were known as avatars. Jesus Christ is, of course, the one who comes to mind, but other virgin births, to name only a few, were Krishna, the Savior, Buddha, Horus, and Zoroaster. Plato was believed to be born of a virgin. 3 more you might be familiar with are Pythagoras, Quetzalcoatl of ancient Mexico, and our own Luke Skywalker. There's a little piece in there. Harkening back to the Magus, the concept of the divine conception or immaculate conception lies in the common belief among mystics and Oriental philosophers that the power of thought, or the power of a mental or audible word, if you will, is capable of impregnating matter, bringing lifeless matter into consciousness. That's the whole idea around immaculate conception. Veiled Ices suggests, therefore, the existence of a higher power and occult, or secret, principles of divine energy. In summary, Veiled Ices, or the High Priestess, may be interpreted in a reading as using the following keywords: science, analysis, labor, secret, mystery, occult, hidden, receptive, passive, using both physical and psychic senses to discern the truth, half-truths, hidden principles of divine energy, or the subconscious mind. So let's have a look. Clearly we see here the High Priestess from the Weight Deck, and she's got Boaz and Joaquin here. That's what the B and J mean, and I don't remember what Boaz and Joaquin were, except I think they were they were pillars on the on Solomon's temple. They were pillars on Solomon's temple. Our temple is the mystery school because we predate Solomon. Or they could be the pillars of Hermes as well. You can see how this card so clearly is a reinterpretation of this card. She has the scarf behind, she's resting between Boaz and Joaquin, and you'll notice that both of them have a little bit of water here in the background. Can you see that water back there? Mm-hmm. That symbolizes the subconscious mind. But this gal is sitting inside of a magic circle, and her book is completely open. So she doesn't really convey the idea of secret, particularly in this deck. Whereas in this deck, she does. Her book is slightly covered up there.
But she has stacks of closed books around her, too.
Oh yeah, she's reading like anything. She's reading like all get out. And in that sense, maybe that card focuses more on the analysis, right, that we associate with veiled Isis, science and analogy, and labor. And there's a lot of labor involved with research and analysis. Okay, so if there are no more questions about this or comments, I'll move on to, oops, went too fast. Isis Unveiled. Isis Unveiled. She's usually called the Empress. In Egyptian Tarot, Arcanum 3 is called Isis Unveiled. Arcanum 2, Veiled Isis, is represented by Virgo, the Virgin, with the moon atop of her head. In Arcanum 3, the veil disappears and the moon now appears at her feet, indicating that Isis Unveiled is pregnant. As an aside, Egyptian art was highly stylized, and men and women were always depicted as beautiful and slender, and women were rarely depicted as pregnant. On that rare occasion, pregnancy was represented merely as a slight curvature of the abdomen, so as not to be noticeable unless one was really looking for it. Isis Unveiled is ruled by Libra, as you can see by the glyph in the upper right-hand corner. Libra is the natural ruler of all partnerships and astrologically combines the seasons of summer and winter. The key words for Isis Unveiled are balance, marriage, or action. And she is ruled by Libra, the ruler of the 7th house of marriage and partnerships. Isis Unveiled symbolizes the union of the polarities, the masculine and feminine energies as represented by the Magus and veiled Isis. As an image of pregnancy, Isis Unveiled represents a birth or creation through the marriage of opposites, causing vibrational change or action. The creative force motivating all life. The number 3 is expressed as a Holy Trinity in Christianity as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. In the ancient Egyptian pantheon as Osiris, Isis, and Horus. In Hindu, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And the list goes on and on. Pythagoras talked about the numbers, the number 3. I'm going to step over here for a moment. As the first number that can be symbolized as a thing or a form. So we have 1, which is a form, but it doesn't make anything. It could be this, or it could be this, or it could be this. 2 could be this, but it doesn't shape anything, even if you put it like this. But once we have 3, we have triangle. And that's the first time we see a form that could be thought about as an earthly thing.
Something that manifests in this three-dimensional
Something that manifests
world.
as three-dimensional, exactly. It makes a form. I didn't read that there. The phallic globe she holds in her right masculine hand symbolizes the eternal and everlasting creative principle that exerts itself upon everything already born or yet to be born. I like to think of it as a turning globe, sort of as the world turns. The eagle she holds in her left feminine hand is a symbol of the highest expression of love at the time of union or conception. Her crown of 12 stars represents the 12 signs of the zodiac. The masculine sun and the feminine moon are depicted above and below the cube, upon which Isis Unveiled sits, symbolizing the earth. The cube is decorated with the eyes of Horus, signifying that union opens the eyes of the soul to knowledge of good and evil. Discerning the difference between good and evil is paramount in the process of manifesting because creation never ceases. It is as instantaneous as the moment of conception. We teach in the Brotherhood of Light tradition that we are co-creating with God. If we are indeed co-creating with God, then God is not 100% in control of what is created.
Yeah.
We have something to do with creation, and that is a huge responsibility. People ask all the time, if God is good, then why do we have wars and evil? We humans, as co-creators, certainly would have something to do with that. The image of Isis Unveiled suggests that because she is pregnant, and therefore in a constant state of creating or co-creating, she holds up the eagle as a symbol of creating with only the highest spiritual values in her heart and mind. If we as humans are really co-creating with God, isn't that the best place to be sure to ensure that we are creating in the best interest of all sentient beings? Isis Unveiled unites the masculine and feminine forces, the yin and yang, and gives them body in an experiential world of physical senses. When I ponder this card and realize that creation happens every moment of the day as a result of our thoughts, emotions, and deeds, the importance of our own clarity and intent becomes paramount. Isis Unveiled represents motherhood and all of its ramifications, a responsibility to create an environment that is healthy and nourishing, comfortable, and loving. In Revelations, Isis Unveiled is described as, quote, a woman clothed with the sun, with a moon under her feet, and with a crown-like tiara of 12 stars on her head. Similarities may be drawn between depictions of Isis Unveiled and depictions of the Holy Mother Mary standing upon a crescent moon in the heavens and crowned with 12 stars. This is an example of Christian overlay or assimilation. The goddess Isis was worshipped throughout the Roman Greco world until around 600 AD, well into the Christian era. In an attempt to win over the hearts and minds of the so-called pagans, the Roman Catholic Church supplanted images of Isis with the images of Mary.
Even the Virgin of Guadalupe stands on a moon.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Key words that could be used for Isis Unveiled in a reading are gestation, fruitfulness, motherhood, a perfect balance or alchemy, making connections, poise, harmony, beauty, artistic expression, and love of luxury. Those are all sort of Libra things, right? Okay, so let's look at the universal weight deck. Here we have an astrological glyph, but they associate the Empress or our Isis Unveiled with Venus, not Libra. So there's a difference right there. She does look kind of pregnant here, doesn't she? She didn't look pregnant, but she's got that big baggy dress on. And I love all of this imagery in the background, this sort of fruitfulness and fecundity of the earth. You know, the flowing waterfall through the forest. You know, she's got grasses and wheat growing in front of her, which would be kind of a Virgo thing, I suppose. She has her 12 her stars on her head. She's, you know, got, hers looks more like an ice cream cone, doesn't it? I always thought it did. She's got pomegranates on her dress, which symbolizes fruitfulness and fecundity. And she's sitting in this real cushy little chair. It looks very comfortable. This one clearly is one of those sweet tarot decks that they're sweet, but they're not very honest because they don't show any negativity in their cards at all. And this is one of them. I don't know the name of the deck, but this card clearly depicts the idea of motherhood, and it's called the Mother, as a matter of fact. So separate aspects of the same idea. Any questions or comments before we move on?
Did you talk about the Eye of Horus in the Egyptian version of this one?
Yes, right. The Eye of Horus indicates that, do you want me to go back?
Yeah.
Somehow I missed that, Allyn. Probably trying to write.
I tried to help you out there.
I know, you do, too.
Well, that symbol right there, that's the feminine symbol. What did you say that represented? Virgo?
No, this
Venus.
represents Venus, so it's just
Venus.
another one. But Mercury, that doesn't, that's not the astrological correspondence to our deck, so I don't know what you're taking notes for if
Oh,
you're working on. Yeah, I'm just using it as, these as just,
But Venus does rule Libra, which is the association.
yeah, exactly.
right?
So, it's somewhat the same type of feminine energy.
So what'd you say about the Eye of Horus?
Oh, the Eye of Horus, according to C.C. Zane, when we engage in carnal knowledge, basically, our eyes are opened up to discerning between good and evil.
Oh, thank you.
Interesting concept.
Wouldn't have wanted to miss that.
No. Not at all. Okay. So let's go on to number 4, the Sovereign. He's called the Emperor in most decks. The 4th major arcanum, the number 4 is a symbol of containment as 4 lines. When combined, form a box, and 4 walls make a room. Again, we have this Pythagorean idea of forming shapes. The 4 winds and the 4 directions define space on a larger scale. The 4 elements and the 4 dimensions describe our physical plane. The 4 seasons measure a year. There are endless biblical references to the numbers 4 and 40, and there just happens to be 4 principles of magic or manifestation. The 4 principles of magic are thought, as represented by the Magus, reception and analysis, as represented by veiled Isis, action or gestation, as represented by Isis unveiled, and finally, realization, as represented by the Sovereign. The key word for the Sovereign is, indeed, realization. So combined, the first 4 major arcanums explain the process of magic or manifestation. There are also 4 letters in Yod He Vah He, a word to describe the undescribable, the everything and the all. In this connection, Einstein said, "We never need to count more than 4 to understand all things." I think it's a great comment. When contemplating biblical passages that contain the numbers 4 and 40, think about those numbers as substitutes for the phrase, "as long as it takes to manifest," and the passage may become clearer. Jesus was in the desert for as long as it took to overcome the temptations of Satan. Moses wandered the desert with his people for as long as it took to reach the promised land. Or it rained for as long as it took to cleanse the earth. In Egyptian tarot, the Sovereign is ruled by Scorpio. Scorpio rules the male sex organs and sexual drive. So further key words for this card are desire, and here I might add, ladies and those watching at home, that you might want to write some of these down, because I don't think I included them all in the Sovereign. So you might just take a moment and write down desire, magnetism, creative energies, and control over passions. I'm giving everyone a moment to write. Are you all ready? 2 more, maybe sexual drive or sexual energy. And have I mentioned sex yet?
Pregnancy.
I've been saying sex for a little while. When I see this card in a spread, that's usually the first thing that comes to my mind. It has to do with sexual energy or sexual drive. Like the Magus, he is masculine and poses with the right hand pointing up to gain insight from the inner plane, and his left hand pointing to earth to manifest in accordance with divine will. But the sovereign is not standing before an altar, nor is he dressed like a priest. He is seated on a throne, an earthly throne, and wears the crown of Pharaoh. So this is more earthly representation of the masculine energy. This is very definitely an earthly representation. When I study this card, I think of the famous quote by John Dalberg Acton, who said, "Absolute power corrupts absolutely." With this quote in mind, the sovereign's pose could quite easily be interpreted as right hand pointing up to show rulership, which is another key word you might write down, and his left hand pointing down to subjugate those he rules. So subjugation might be another key word. But to understand an even deeper meaning of this card, it is important to remember that Scorpio is the only sign in the zodiac represented by two images: his degenerate form by the earthbound scorpion, and his regenerate form by the heavenly soaring eagle. To quote Frederick Goodman from Zodiacal Signs, quote, "The degenerative scorpionic is often given to antisocial behavior," you can write that down, "and to criminal activities," you can write that down, "being a law unto himself." Oh my. Such a direction brings a sense of violence and intrigue. You can write those down. Rebelliousness, cruelty, and self-indulgence, and the like, end quote. He further writes, the regenerative scale is penetrating, excuse the pun, inspirational, extreme, magnetic, intense, creative, shrewd, self-confident, masterful, and healing. I do believe those are in your notes.
I have a question with that. So since we're talking about the signs, I'm thinking that this guy, to me, is representing the epitome of patriarchy. Or am I wrong?
Oh no, it could be a sense of patriarchy, but it's also masculine energy in that sense, because it's, you know, masculine energy in all its forms. Yeah. Which, yes.
What does the line stand for? Because I don't know if you have the line with the circle at the top.
You know, that would be his scepter, and it would show his sign of rulership. It's in his right, which is also masculine hand. He's making the same sign as the Magus does. Shows that kind of masculine energy again. As above, so below.
With the circle at the top?
Oh, the circle at the top. Good question. That symbolizes spirit.
Oh, okay.
It symbolizes spirit, wholeness, oneness. So, you know, in his regenerative form, it's inspirational. It's an inspirational energy.
I
It's
don't
creative.
see that list of regenerate qualities listed
Oh, you
here.
don't?
Would
Okay.
you go over them once more?
I certainly will, my friend. Penetrating, inspirational, extreme. Scorpios just are that way. They're just extreme one way or the other. Magnetic, intense, creative, shrewd, self-confident, masterful, and healing.
Thank you.
What was before healing?
Masterful. So, in other words,
If boundaries are not set around Scorpios, and they are not held accountable either to themselves or a higher power, they can get out of control. Another adage comes to mind. With power comes responsibility. You can write that down. It becomes clear that it is the sovereign's struggle to learn control or redirect his passions in a positive direction. The sovereign pictured here is wearing an eagle on his chest, as does his consort. Isis Unveiled hold up the eagle in her left hand, remember? So once again, looking at this pose, his right hand pointing up could represent awareness of spiritual applications of his scorpion desires. And his left hand pointing down could symbolize his use of energies to subjugate control, or redirect physical desires in order that he may soar like an eagle to spiritual heights. Yes, Jen?
The rod that he's holding in his hand, or the scepter, looks like a snake. Is it a cobra snake?
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, that's that powerful image of the snake, of the masculine thought forms, or the.
That's also the symbol cobra's strike. So there's your
Certainly.
Scorpio symbol.
There you go.
What are those stars above his head?
Well, those could be. They usually are a loose representation of the actual constellation in the heavens.
Oh, okay.
Scorpio.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Is that a cat on the?
Yes, and we're going to be talking about that cat. I also want you to notice that how he's standing. Look at the way he's sitting like that with his legs crossed. Can you see that?
Yeah.
That's that sign of the cross, where he's got this duality going.
I think that also is similar to the alchemical symbol for sulfur.
Could be. Could be. So this concept of not repressing sexual energy, but redirecting it, is the basis for tantric sex, pagan ritualistic sex, and celibacy in connection with a spiritual or religious quest. So let's tie all of this together by combining the idea of realization with sex. The universe is made up of only atoms and star systems. If we look at both of these systems, we find that they act virtually the same. Both function on positive and negative polarities, attracting and engaging with each other, male and female elements in a perfect, perpetual dance. In that sense, it could be said that the entire universal order, and certainly manifestation or realization, is based on sex. It's what makes the world go around. Before we leave the sovereign, there's one more piece of symbolism that is worth mentioning and that Laura just mentioned a minute ago, and there is a cat pictured on his throne. What is special about cats? Anybody?
Independence.
That's one. What else?
Nocturnal.
Yes, yes, cats can see in the dark. This cat, too, can symbolize psychic ability and the penetration of illusion, the afterlife and the spirit world. As the ruler of the 8th house, Scorpio. This card can also represent other people's money, a legacy, or inheritance, and taxes. And now we can have a look at the slide.
So that comes into play with sovereignty as well, as nations have their own sovereignty.
Individuals have their own sovereignty. And it's more about individuals than I would say nations. You know, we have our own sovereignty even though we're all one. And we're still individual universes unto ourselves.
But just like the Tao Te Ching talks about, is about advice for the sage, for the evolved person. It also is advice for the rulers of nations.
Oh, certainly. Oh,
How to
certainly.
rule your realm
Absolutely,
well.
absolutely.
This card would certainly relate to
Of
that.
course it would, because, yeah, we're talking about how important it is to be a good ruler, to be responsible in our power.
What is on his apron? Is that a Masonic symbol? It looks like the...
You see it throughout our deck, and what it is, it's a little. The pharaohs used to wear this sort of apron thing in the front. So you'll also notice that his skirt is shaped like a pyramid, and that little apron comes down, and I think it might be decorative, although it could represent a door in a way, because there are some pyramids in this deck that have doorways into them, which means a solution or a place to go for an answer. And there are two snakes on either side that you see pointing up, and snakes are signs of enlightenment usually.
Would you use your light to show me the snake on there?
There's one right there,
Okay.
and there's one right there.
Okay. All right.
The little red heads sticking out to the side, right? That are coiled in the middle.
Right, and I can't tell if are they different colors? They often are different colors, which would mean sort of, again, a dichotomy or a positive and negative.
Well, and it's right over his genital chakra. So.
There you go. And this is a very sexual card. So it's emphasizing the genital, that his enlightenment may have to stem from that place, and he may have to sublimate that energy to a higher expression.
So that's when we get that, I guess, that saying about men thinking with their penises.
I guess so.
They haven't sublimated it yet.
In this Emperor of the weight deck, one of the weight decks, this looks like he's ruled by Aries, doesn't it? Yeah. We have Scorpio ruling ours. And this fellow, he does not have an astrological correspondence, but clearly he shows this, his mastership or rulership by holding this big scepter in his hand that has light beaming from it. And he does seem like an enlightened ruler, doesn't he? What the polar bear symbolizes, I don't know. Other than,
yes.
Mastership maybe over nature in some way, mastering his own nature, his own, darker.
And the purity.
His more
the
animalistic side. Yes.
white bear.
And the white bear, exactly. And to show how powerful he is, that he has rulership over this big animal. So I love to look at other cards and try to understand what they're trying to show us, because oftentimes they do give us insight to our own cards. We have come upon 12 o'clock, and this is the time in the Brotherhood of Light tradition when we do our healing service. So I'm going to take a few moments out. O thou eternal Spirit, in whom we live, move, breathe, and have our being, we come before you to partake of the healing forces of the legions of light. Each soul struggles to fulfill its part in the divine plan. Just as the sun vitalizes all physical life, so do the healing rays of divine goodness vitalize and regenerate when illness of body and misfortune of life threaten to invade one's immortal soul. Vitalized by the healing rays of divine goodness, the soul can grow in happiness, usefulness, and spirituality, and strive to take its rightful place in the divine plan. May we all remain a few minutes in silence as we ask that all those listed and all those gathered here partake of your divine goodness and power. And may the legions of light direct these healing energies so that we may live in perfect health and fortune in all areas of life. O thou eternal Spirit, we thank you for the healing aid and the opportunity to live a more constructive life. So shall it be.
So shall it be.
Thank you. And now we will break for until 1 o'clock for our lunch.